weird. What a weird way to start.
Okay, I'm beeping and booping.
Okay.
I'm booping, beeping. Everything's recording and we are live. Kyle, the floor is yours.
All right. Being a woman in this world is hard enough, but being a woman in a horror movie is so much worse. From the earliest horror movies, when a woman showed up on screen, she was most likely to be murdered, kidnapped, or experimented on by some depraved scientist, and sometimes all three. And if not, they were likely screaming, fainting, or having the plot of the movie mansplained to them. But then in the 1970s, something happened. In films like Silent Night, Bloody Night, or Black Christmas, or The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, women were fighting back, and most importantly, they were becoming the last person standing. To quote, "The image of the distressed female most likely to linger in memory is the image of the one who did not die, the survivor, or final girl. She is the one who encounters the mutilated bodies of her friends and perceives the full extent of the preceding horror and of her own peril, who is chased, cornered, wounded, whom we see scream, stagger, fall, rise, and scream again. She looks death in the face, but she alone also finds the strength either to stay the killer long enough to be rescued or to kill him herself." End quote. Those words come from Her Body Himself, Gender in the Slasher Film, an article from 1987 by writer Carol J. Clover, the woman who coined the term final girl. Much has been written and discussed about this trope. You might say the entire Scream franchise is built on it, but I wanted to flash forward to modern times and take a look at three films that feature this concept, but in much more 21st century terms. The three films we're looking at today are 2022's Prey, 2019's Sweetheart, and 2020's remake of The Invisible Man. And joining me are a trio of final boys. Taking a break from thinking about exorcisms, it's Keenan Diaz.
Hey.
Feeling all the feelings, it's the handsomest man in podcasting, Mr. Tommy Metz.
Oh my goodness, go on.
And the king of the castle, the lord of the manor, podcaster and impresario, Mr. Pete Wright.
Today, Kyle, I'm merely an enthusiast in your shadow.
All right, so we're going to talk about Last Woman Standing, essentially a trope that has. What was can you guys think of early times that you heard about this or first noticed this as a trend? Were you already aware of the Scream Queens by the time you started getting into horror?
Yeah, probably Halloween was the one where it just became extremely clear what we were doing. And I'm not necessarily a huge Halloween fan, but I remember around that time, that being some of the first times that I was hearing ideas like that.
That's right. Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, I think she's usually the one that I hear about the most. And then like the movies that I was growing up with, like Scream, right, were in conversation with Laurie Strode in Halloween. So it feels like everything has come out of there. I like that you have these earlier examples, but I think Laurie Strode is the first, last, and everything, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And that means I don't know how you're going to order our discussion today because
Laurie Strode is an interesting one because she's gotten a chance to come back and face down her demons twice. In subsequent films, they're like, this is it, the final time that she does it. And then 20 years later, no, this is it. She now is coming back for real.
Evil dies tonight.
Tonight
again.
And they even kill off Laurie Strode and then decide later, no.
No. We need a do-over. Yeah.
I guess let's start a little bit with probably the one that was least known and probably the lowest budgeted. Let's start with 2019's Sweetheart. So this is a girl versus monster, essentially, but it has a little bit more going on. So had either of you even heard of this before I put it on the list?
Not at all.
Not at all. Nope.
I recognized one thing about it is I like the guy that plays the heavy, her boyfriend. He was one of the main actors in the OA. A Netflix series, which I dearly love. So it was a drag to see that he was a jerk in this because he's like the love interest in the OA.
Everybody's got to pay their dues, right?
Yeah.
How did you come to this film, Kyle?
It was
to all of us.
This was during the time that when we were doing Saturday Matinee, and so that was I got in the habit of watching pretty much all the trailers that were coming out. And from that, all of a sudden something would hit me like, ooh, like not only could I talk about this, but also like this is one to add to my list. And that's when I discovered Sofa, which is the app that I use to like remember all of the things that I want to watch, add it on there, and then wait for it to show up in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, this is one of the ones that I discovered like during lockdown. I think it was one of those I bought it on the from the streaming times when it was like we couldn't go out to the movie theaters, so I was looking for something new and interesting. So let's say then I guess how did it hit you now, coming into knowing that we were going to be discussing it? So I was like, Tommy just took a drink, so I'm going to start. I'll ask Pete.
The challenge that I have with this, and I remember it actually, and I remember now why I remembered it, because we did one of the Saturday matinees that we did was all about creature design. We had a list about creature design, and somebody put Sweetheart on the list because the creature is depending on how they use the creature, it's really cool and scary and
not
for
too CG.
Not too CG. No. And so for a movie that is otherwise, pretty low budget, pretty meager on, what they would need to spend apart from travel to the island, I guess. They put a lot of attention to that creature, and I think it really leans on the Jaws stuff. Like, we're going to keep a lot of it close to our vest because we know what it's going to look like in broad daylight on the beach. So we're going to play this pretty cool and let her shine. Right. Let her shine. So in the scope of this conversation, I think she is a real testament to, obviously you've thought about this. It's not a surprise, but she's a real testament to the theme because she gets to be all of the treated in the whole spectrum of sort of social response. She's alone. She then finds people, they're jerks. She has to respond to them from a sort of socio-political arena where they just don't believe her. They deny her truth, her existence. And then she has to fight a monster and escape. And I thought like that whole arc was really, really nice in a movie that does sometimes feel its budget. Otherwise, I found it really satisfying.
Yeah, for me, that exactly what you were talking about, her being alone on the island and having to survive, and then we start with sort of Castaway, and then turns out there's this other thing here that she has to deal with, and then other people arrive, and things get so much worse. Yeah, that's when like the movie really hooked me of like, oh, having other people arrive to help ends up being way worse than when she was just by herself.
Yeah, and the movie can dance along those lines. I think that's one of the things that exhausts me about other horror properties where, it's humans against humans are the worst. They're the true monster. And in fact, they were jerks, but also there was a true monster. And I'm glad we came back to that. It wasn't just the idiots.
Yeah, I have to really think about this because I had a little trouble with that structure. It should be as satisfying for me as you're saying it is, right? But it's sort of backwards. So I don't want to be like, oh, they should never try anything new. But I'm used to the idea of the final girl, right? Of Ripley and Alien having to play social horror and then playing survival horror, and this is backwards, right? So it threw me a little bit. I'm still on the fence about it. But I really, really like the moments in the beginning where Kiersey Clemons has to survive. I think that's very compelling. You sort of maybe know there's a monster. I guess the director J.D. Dillard was talking about, premiering it at Sundance, giving it a title that doesn't suggest horror, and kind of loving the idea that he would be in an audience watching it with people who didn't know there was a monster.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I because we're doing it for the show, I kind of knew there was a monster, etc. But yeah, it's really compelling in those first two parts of it for me, and it's all on Kiersey Clemons' performance for sure.
She's incredible, and I think this movie really knows how to use its budget, which is great. They don't blow it all on one sequence. I still don't. I mean, did they just light a damn island on fire? Right? Is that allowed? It looked pretty real.
There's so many islands. Like, who's going to miss one?
Oh, yeah.
That's a good point. One of the things that I wanted to point out that is not profound, but there's one thing that all three of these movies, and I'm not skipping ahead, but connects all three, and Pete already touched on it. The women are not believed.
Yes.
In every single one of these, the women are all underestimated, but they are also told to their face, that's not true. We'll take it from here, pat on the head.
Yeah.
And that's sort of like this undercurrent of horror underneath all of these movies, is they know the truth and no one will listen to them.
Yeah.
And that feels very charged with, gender politics, which is cool.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to sort of take that standard thing of just last ones and then move it into like with the 21st century ideas. So I'm glad you picked up on that. Yeah. One of the things I particularly like about this is like when you talk about the budget and how much they did, how much the sort of the camera helps tell the story of because she's not talking, she's not doing a narration thing, we're not in her head, but we get to see her figure these things out, and the way they have it, they shoot it of how her figuring out all these problems without having to go, oh, I can't believe I have to kill this fish, and overdone like that.
That's true. It didn't give us that crutch that some of the other ones, like Fall, Pete, when he did Fall, she's talking to her friend. Spoiler alert, that there, what's his name has the volleyball in The Shallows. She's always talking, to someone like the person, I don't remember who it was, but they find a way through that. This movie just didn't.
Right.
And I didn't realize how much I appreciate that until you pointed it out, because it was refreshing. Like it really makes you lean in. It becomes this is not a movie I can do laundry to, like, to use a cliche. It's not going to be there for you. You can't leave the room.
Right.
Which is cool.
Yeah, and the early sequences where she is discovering camp, figuring out Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which you were talking about off mic earlier, right?
Yeah.
Like, what do I have to do? So I have to sort of triage these things, try to protect this guy who, when they land on the island, he's in danger and she's trying to save him, and it doesn't last very long. But then like discovering a cooler and then discovering old Cokes inside of it from the 80s and discovering a Walkman and going, oh God, this is getting worse and worse the more that I learned that people got disappeared on here 20 years ago and maybe I'm next.
I loved the 80s Cokes. Right? Like, what a treasure chest for a certain generation. Like that Walkman. Yeah, I had that Walkman. Right?
She opens a cooler, it's just filled with Jolt.
Yeah, Spuds McKenzie stuffed animal. Yeah.
Yeah. What do we know about J.D. Dillard? Like, I haven't seen J.D. Dillard's other stuff. Anybody have any experience from the director?
No, not particularly. That's the thing is with this is that it was, it sort of in the time it came out, it never really popped. So like he did Slight in 2016, if you ever saw that, which is like a magician on the streets, like having to use like magic to fight gangs. Like I made it sound way more exciting than it actually is. But this came out and it sort of didn't really make as big of an impression, but he directed a movie called Devotion after this, which I have not seen. It stars Jonathan Majors, so it's not really high on my list.
Yeah.
Well, he was slated to direct a Star Wars movie back when they were giving those out like candy, and then they retracted those, right? They were like, we've overextended Star Wars. So whether that was a mark on him or not, right? He had this big movie that then folded, and then also supposed to do a Rocketeer sequel.
and I'm like, every time I'm like, I hope somebody gets to make a Rocketeer movie.
Oh yeah,
I love the first Rocketeer movie, but it's like it's also been a long time. Like we could use another one. It was 91.
It feels so good, that whole movie. I mean, I think that I don't know how much more there is to really say about the movie. The creature looked great. The location was awesome, and she did a just bang up job at delivering the strong sort of protagonist. Going beyond mere survival. I think we've really, we covered it. I think the whole agency and empowerment angle is one that I'm sort of looking for in all of these films. Like, in what way does it feel like the film allows our protagonist to have agency and control over the world around them? And when do I feel that constraint being, when it is pulled away from her? And this movie was that rubber band. It was that roller coaster. Like, I kept feeling the tension came when she lost control and then regained it was exhilarating. So it's a small movie, and it's not a romantic focused movie, right? We get just a little tease that there was some history, but the fact that it doesn't rely on any sort of romantic entanglement to manipulate our emotions further is equally satisfying, right? It's the same thing we do get from Fall, right? Where it's just, surviving. And I thought that was a nice approach.
Yeah, when they show up and they sort of bring the drama in of all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's sort of she's having to sort of stop and go, oh yeah, what was I annoyed about? What was I upset about?
Yeah.
Like I've been fighting for my life, and now it's sort of like, oh yeah, she looked at me wrong, or it's all of a sudden like there's all this ridiculous thing that doesn't really matter anymore, and then it all sort of falls away. Did anyone have a problem with at the end of like that the fact that it just becomes girl versus monster?
Oh, I have no problem with that because I think I really like this monster. Yeah. And I think that we've been in her shoes so effectively, and she's been smart. I like that the creature is, as Kiersey Clemons is pointing out, right? It's this white creature. They did sort of the opposite, so it looks scary in the dark, but when they go underwater, you get to see the whole thing, and it's even scarier because it's so white. I like that a lot. And then while we're on that, she's saying that was sort of the white versus black like political messaging that J.D. Dillard, because Dillard is black and Kiersey Clemons is black, and she says that Dillard was talking about like thinking about it as not just female hysteria being neglected or pushed off, but black women specifically being pushed off, and people not believing black women when they say we're in danger, there's something out there, there's a big white scary thing, and you white people aren't listening to me.
There was one part that I bounced against, not because it was bad, but I wasn't exactly sure where to put it in this sort of more female empowerment kind of thing. When she's tied up, when she wakes up after the failed boat escape, and he has that long talk with her about not believing her, but then if we get out of here, what will you go back to? I pay for your entire life. You have nothing. That was an interesting thing to put in there. And I didn't know exactly, I wasn't exactly on the same line of why is that there now?
Right.
Is it just to make her more fleshed out? Is it to give the heavies, not the monster, but the human heavies, more of a reason to not just be I'm not believing you because that's my thing? I mean, it complicates her in a way that I don't know if I needed that far into the movie when we already kind of knew where things were headed.
Yeah. I took it as essentially the sort of the Miramax version of this would have started with them partying on the boat.
Right.
And then and you would have there would have been, there would have been whatever pop hits at the time, and then they hit a rock and stuff, and then it'll be chaos, and then she'd wake up on the beach, and then that. But so it's sort of like she is in a different movie by that point. Like he's still in that movie. Yeah. And trying to play all that stuff. And she's like, no, I've got way bigger problems than
my priorities have shifted.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's almost like he's still coming in with an old script, and she's like, no, we've moved on past that. We're in a new draft now.
Yes, she might have been the type of person in the before times who would have defended herself and failed and be angry that no one believes her. And and here she's just like, we cannot talk about this right now. Like maybe later on, but there's a big old monster chasing us. So.
And he's lecturing her after it's heavily hinted at that he killed that first guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, with his bloody knife, with all the blood that's in the raft, all of that stuff.
Right. I mean, there's an assumption of cannibalism, right?
Oh, I didn't get that.
Really?
I just took it as
I guess that's where I go.
I went to conservation of resources. Essentially, like he was like, "Oh, there's 3 of us on this boat. With 2, it'd be a lot easier." And he,
Pete heard raft and just immediately started licking his lips.
None of you thought cannibalism. You just described why cannibalism would be awesome. We're gonna snack on this third guy and lighten the load and feel good.
Wow, Pete's got long pork on the brain.
Wow. Okay.
Well, as we go from, and we see in this movie, our final girl goes from predator from prey to predator. So then let's do our discussion over to the movie called Prey, which is part of the Predator franchise. Was anyone surprised? Like they started like, wait a minute, that's a Predator. We all knew it was like a.
I had heard it. I knew about
it
ahead of time.
Okay, good. Right.
But that would have been sweet had I not.
Yes.
I would have loved that. I
Yeah.
remember the main thing I remember thinking about this movie when it first came out is why didn't it get a theatrical release?
Yeah.
It feels like
it is shocking. Yeah, it says $65 million for a budget. So they've had all these stories. Yeah, we wanted to promote Hulu or whatever. There must be something more than that, because that doesn't make any sense at all what they've been saying. It feels like they must have, I don't know, wanted it to be theatrical and then pushed it over to Hulu.
Yeah.
Some of the CGI doesn't hold up. Also, and potentially really doesn't hold up on a big screen. I think, like the bear, like a lot of the animal stuff. The monster looks good. The predator looks good, but a lot of the natural wildlife, apparently you can't get anything to sit still because everything.
You're not really allowed to kill snakes the way that they used to in
That's a good point.
1987
Yeah,
when they're
right.
making this movie.
I think that's an interesting observation, and because to me it worked actually exceptionally well, and I did watch it on the big screen headset.
There you go.
And it really holds up for me. I mean, I watched it on 3x speed. Does that count? But the thing that I one of the reasons I was so interested in this is because I am very interested in the director. Dan Trachtenberg is a fascinating person, and I feel like we sort of like he's a person that is of the internet, and I first started following Dan when he was doing the Totally Rad show with Alex Albrecht on Revision 3, and then he ended up making this fantastic short in 2011, Portal No Escape, that was based on the Portal franchise. And you just knew this guy is going to be incredible. He's going to be able to do some great things. Went on to direct Playtest, the Black Mirror episode. Exceptional.
That's my favorite one.
It's really good. That's Dan Trachtenberg.
So scary.
The pilot episodes of The Boys and The Lost Symbol, like he's just an incredibly talented person. So again, I guess I'm just leveling up your point. Why the hell didn't this get a theatrical release? Because he's good. The movie's great. Like it deserved more.
And there were several films from this franchise which did not deserve theatrical release.
Should not have had a theatrical release. Absolutely.
Anything with verses included in the title.
Yeah.
If
Are we still doing direct to VHS? Like, can we
they still exist? Yeah. If they count this as a TV movie, I mean, this is among like the top handful of best TV movies I've ever seen. I mean, like Behind the Candelabra or Recount or those HBO Prestige things. This is an exceptional movie, Kyle. So I'm glad you brought it to us. Yeah.
Had you not seen it before?
Not seen it before. I've known about it. Unfortunately, I knew it was a Predator movie. Man, that would have been fun. But it is.
I mean, on the poster, like it's the shape of the thing. So if you knew
on the poster, but with a male native fighting the monster instead of the female native. But she's exceptional. Amber Midthunder. She should be a star. I imagine that she's still rising based on this, but it is one of the great performances in horror movies. I think
she's one of the main characters in Legion.
Yes,
which I love. Yeah.
I can't say enough nice things about Prey. I was really over the moon for it.
Where'd you land, Tommy?
Yeah, very much so. The only movie that I hadn't seen before was I can't remember.
Sweetheart. We were just
that
together,
name
right?
does not stick. I keep wanting to call it Baby Girl, but I know that's a completely different movie.
That would have worked as well.
I know, but they're both like infantilizing women. But no, this movie is great. I think I really love its patience. I love it. Seems, not knowing that culture, it seems very honoring that culture and making sure that it gets things right. There's nothing that seems sort of tropey about it. And I like going back and seeing sort of the evolution of some of the Predator's weapons and how they have changed and what they were. And I like that the Predator gets its ass kicked sometimes, not by the bear. Like it, for a while, it does not feel like a real hunting expedition because he's got lasers.
Right.
But then, it's a real kind of cool fight. And I like that it's going around and just collecting these things.
Yeah.
It's cool.
And having that especially the even though you're right about little dodgy CGI, but like I thought the whole sequence with the bear was fantastic of her having to take cover and then
Yeah.
her sort of watching through it as something, this horrible monster that's about to kill her. Another horrible monster shows
Right.
up to try and kill it, and then it's like, oh no, it's that, to go back to the tagline, no matter who wins, I lose.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's this great premise within the Predator series, right? Of trying to not be a threat in order to kill it, right? And that's kind of in all of them. And sometimes it's really successful, sometimes they sort of forget it. And in this one, they tie it to the emotionality of this main character, like her journey, and that it is not really there. I mean, Schwarzenegger as Dutch is not going to be that for long. You know, he's not going to play Prey for very long. And then I think it's the most interesting in like Danny Glover at the end of Predator 2 of like putting that side aside. And but this one is really, really built in. She wants to be a hunter. She wants to be respected, and the only way in this society to be respected is to be a hunter. But she's smarter than a beaver, as she says, right? That's who she naturally is, and she has to find a way to become the final girl, right? And everything that entails. So I was struck by how moved I was by the end of the film, and just the last moments where she gets her arc, and it's covered in green Predator nonsense all over her. It's like I was actually moved. I was actually like, wow, in a way that I didn't expect, even though I've heard really positive things about it.
Yeah, the amount of care and attention they pay to essentially her arc, like how much, without really playing too heavy into the like, girls don't hunt, like they don't do a big they could very easily have been like, had the the leader of their tribe be like, you are not allowed to eat any of that stuff. But it was this societal pressure they have of just like her mother sort of looking at her like,
right,
like you're going out again, not like, no, don't go out there. It's just like looking at her like, really, you're going out there with them again? Just sort of like, okay, it's just that quiet pressure that we all know from from parental figures and stuff too, or her being teased by the guys. It wasn't like, go home, woman. It was like, oh, look at her, she's gonna try and do this. It's much more subtle and much more controlled, especially and for a franchise film. It's kind of incredible. And so so I want to talk a little bit about that. Like, we don't have to like go through the entire history of it, but this plays very interestingly in that it's playing to two audiences at once. It's playing to people who are like, all right, new Predator movie, and people who are like, I don't know anything about Predator, but this looked cool. So very early on, he establishes, here's all the things, here's all of the, like, it's from space, like the ship comes down really early, like this is an alien
pre-title.
Yes, exactly. Like it's invisible, it has claw, like all this stuff is established right away, so we're all kind of on the same page, like everybody like, okay, we got it, all right, here we go, and then off it goes. So it doesn't reintroduce us to concepts that we've seen in all the previous Predator things too, but it sort of catches everybody up and then moves forward with its own story, which is kind of amazing, because it's like, especially this being the, what is it, 7th? I didn't do the math.
If you include the AVP ones, 7th. Yeah.
I mean, like and I mean, even Shane Black, who I've just spent like how many hours talking about. I was working on Iron Man 3. Took a shot at the Predator, and he was there in the very
first
the
Predator.
Movie. Yeah, and then he did, the Predator, and maybe the less said about that, the better. And he's a filmmaker of renown, and Dan Trachtenberg is still sort of making his bones. But this is a really outstanding. You can kind of see why he's had this hype, because if you look at through his Dan Trachtenberg list of stuff, the corpses of projects that almost happened for him and that didn't. 21 Cloverfield, 10 Cloverfield Lane was one that did happen and popped, and then after that it was just like he would get booked on something cool and then they would just cancel it and cancel it and cancel it and cancel it. I'm really glad that he get a second chance to do something and would show he wasn't just a one-hit wonder.
Well, for sure. And I'm really glad you brought up 10 Cloverfield Lane, because that movie was 92% outstanding. And then they shoehorned that stupid Cloverfield universe into it.
Yeah.
Like, that could have been a fantastic standalone film, and they just couldn't stop messing with it. So when you hear Dan Trachtenberg is doing another franchise film, like, you kind of have to worry after 10 Cloverfield Lane that it's who's going to be messing with it. And the fact that they didn't mess with it largely and even though it faced, reportedly faced the kinds of challenges that are just associated with franchise films and the expectations of fans, but the fact that he was then allowed to release a Comanche dub of it was like, how fantastic is that? Did anybody watch the Comanche version?
No,
my Hulu player wouldn't let me. I wanted to switch to it, and it didn't let me do that.
I have the Blu-ray version that has
it. Okay, all right, it's out there. I was wondering if that was just some press release that they pulled on us. I was being very cynical.
No. It's on Hulu. I think you have to like, it's a separate movie.
Yeah, a separate audio track.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
I would love to go and take a look at that version, right?
Yeah, it's really neat, and it's just really neat. The only I like, in the spirit of they give you one thing and you just want more. What would have been awesome is if it had been in the language and not
if they had actually recorded it,
yeah,
like speaking it,
and
just have it like
recognizing how hard that is.
But language is one of the things too. That's as one of my personal things. I always love how movies treat languages and stuff too. So as the movie's going, we're sort of listening and they're speaking English, but then they meet French traders and they're all speaking French, and we don't get subtitles for that. And I was like, oh, I really like that, because it's like, oh, we're a member of this. We're in her story, and she also doesn't understand them. So and then when the translator comes over, then he's speaking her language, but it's actually English so that we can hear. Those kind of things are the things I nerd out about.
Yeah.
So in terms of like franchises, then let's talk about, like, this is one of a series. So how do you feel this fits in? It does take a lot of the tropes directly from Predator. There are a lot of like the member berries. Like there's a lot of specific things. Like the requel things of it all, of like, okay, we have to have her in the mud, and we have to like these things that to make you remember that. How do we feel it stands on its own versus being part of this larger series?
I had not realized. So she gets this character's flintlock gun, and apparently that's a gun that Danny Glover finds in Predator 2.
Yeah, the Predator hands it to him at the end of Predator 2.
Yeah,
we never knew why.
So I read that afterwards. I'm like, okay, I guess there's probably a bigger Predator nerd out there who likes that. It doesn't get in my way, you know what I mean? So I don't go like, what a weird thing. So it probably works for both audiences, and I appreciated that part of it.
I haven't personally seen enough of the other movies to be able to talk about this. My apologies.
You've seen Predator?
Yes, a long time ago, and there was a Gatling gun in it, and that's all I remember.
Painless,
and anytime.
Yeah.
This Predator has more abs than the other Predator.
Yes.
Did anything in this one spark that for you? Like that you were remembering specifically stuff from Predator as you were watching it, or were you just sort of like enjoying the ride? Tommy,
talking to me?
Yeah.
Enjoying the ride.
Okay.
I mean, I remembered the three. I remember the Huang, like the and the heat vision and stuff like that. Those things, and I always want to be able to read the alien language. That's like the going to get things, and I'm like, I don't know what that means, and how it knows. It somehow instinctually knows what is a weapon and what is not. That kind of stuff is fascinating to me, but I just don't have enough of a remembrance of it. But it doesn't need it. It works great.
Yeah, it stands. It actually has the sort of narrative weight for me to stand alone. Like I could watch this movie and feel it as a strong universal reboot. I don't need. It is a better movie than the original Predator. If you strip all the nostalgia away of like, oh, I saw Predator with my dad and it was great and it was violent and we celebrated violence like only fathers and sons can, gosh, golly gee. If you strip all of that sense memory away, this is a better movie than the original. It is a more interesting, a more compelling movie with a much more fascinating perspective or ideology. So I am completely down for this movie.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that until one of you said that, because you had the more nostalgic, like in the theater seeing it. Then, but it's the best Predator movie. It's maybe the best TV movie. But one thing that I was happy with, knowing it, that it's part of this franchise, because something tends to happen to some of these franchises where eventually Freddy Krueger is our friend.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
that I thought they were gonna, the Predator and her, they're gonna team up against the French or something, right, and become buddies. And I'm glad they didn't do that. The Predator is a freaking monster. That thing needs to get its head cut off, and everyone needs to see it. So I'm really glad they didn't do that of making it cuddly or making it a misunderstood rival or something like that. Like it's a bad dude and he needs to be taken out.
You didn't want them to freeze frame high five at the very end.
It's mostly cloaked and she's fine. It's interesting that a lot of those things that you just talked about that would have been bad decisions were the decisions they made in The Predator.
Right.
But okay, so it's wrapping up this thing. So let's talk about her as the final girl, Neru as our final girl. Like she, obviously, we've learned very quickly that she is smart, that she's not trying to be as strong as she's not trying to sort of beat the men at their own game. She's a skilled hunter. You can do all of these things. It's just about to prove that she is as good as anyone else. And then in the end, she faces this thing on her own. So in Sweetheart, it wasn't really a choice. But in this, they were, everyone sort of doubted that she could do this thing. And then she chose this, like the worst thing on earth, to be the thing that she had to defeat to prove that she was worthy. Like she really could have tried to rally everybody, but she made that decision. So how do we feel about her as a final girl?
Can I just say there's an interesting connection that I think we're making about Sweetheart toward the end there that I think applies here too, and I'm curious if it'll carry through to the next film. That there is a point in the movie for this kind of final girl, this sort of last woman standing, where eventually all of the tropes, all of the obstacles become less obstacles and more nuisance. Like they transcend those obstacles to focus on the fight at hand, and they are no longer mired in the shame, doubt, any of the trappings of the rest of the movie that leads up to that point. And suddenly all they have to do is fight. And even though for her in Prey, there's a point where it becomes not a choice. Like she becomes a target and just has to fight. And maybe that's the switch I'm thinking of. Whereas Sweetheart, she was the target. She was going to be a target all along, right?
Yes.
But in this movie, I think these movies both sort of in parallel transcend those cultural obstacles and become the last woman standing earlier maybe than in other sort of final girl type films, and certainly with more agency, more choice, which I think is interesting. That may be I don't know. We'll see how that plays out.
Is it important that she wants to be a hunter? Other people are hunters. We see her brother win the big hunter match against when he kills the animal,
the cougar.
For her to achieve, she has to outdo. She doesn't equal what the male person in her tribe did. She has to outdo it. And I wonder if there's some sort of
sibling rivalry?
Subtext of either sibling rivalry, but also just sort of oh, okay, you are as good as a man. Instead, if you transcend that, then you become something completely all your own instead of just sort of being one of them. I'm not exactly sure where I'm going, but I enjoy talking.
I think that's totally there, Tommy. And we see a couple times, right, these bands of men going out, and then some of them come back. Sometimes they lose somebody out there. And at the end, a band of men have come out and she's the only one who returns. Right. So not only surviving or killing a bigger bad, but then outlasting them. So I think that's totally into, Kyle's pick of this as last woman standing. Like that is literally how she overcomes. And it does strike me though, right, from a 21st century context, like seeing how this relates to the other movies. Oftentimes with a final girl, the last shot of the movie is her just surviving, right? And that's it. We don't see the ramifications of that. Obviously,
in the back of an ambulance with a blanket around her,
right? Exactly.
Or like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like that person is crazy for life, like in the back of that pickup. Like they are just surviving and maybe not with their sanity. She is. This is full on victory.
Right. Carol Clover in that article that Kyle was quoting. The first one by name that she mentions is Stretch in Texas Chainsaw 2. That's the first person she gets to, and of like becoming the monster and becoming the bad guy, right? And so it's like we get this last shot of Stretch like becoming as crazed as Leatherface was in the original, but that's it, right? We don't see the ramifications of it. So it's interesting here, like seeing her, you know, coming home, coming back, and people rewarding her for that, and not like, oh, you know, your brother should have lived or whatever, or like you. How is that possible? Just like the fact of her surviving and coming home is rewarded.
Yeah, and it is even if you're not a Predator fan, if you're not a monster movie fan, like I would recommend this to anybody just as a pure entertainment. I've seen probably, you know, a dozen movies on Netflix that I've entirely forgotten about. That would be technically this is a direct to streaming movie. I mean, I even just recently a very, very expensive movie that I watched, and the next day I was like trying to explain the plot to somebody, and I was like, hey, there's
there was like an electric state or something.
Robots, but they're like funny, but they're not. They're So, all right. So then let's move on to our final girl. In this case, a movie I think that would be still regarded as a giant hit had it not come out in 2020. But I still think that those who know, and that's 2020's remake of The Invisible Man. This is another one of those ones that I was from the first trailer. I was like, oh, they're doing something very interesting in this. And then as soon as it became available for streaming, I got it. And then I remember being just in a random time home alone. I was like, oh, like for the first time in a long time. And I was like, oh, I have 2 hours to myself where I don't have kids around that I have to like suddenly hide whatever's on the screen. Of, you know, like, oh, it's not a monster. It's just a weird looking dog. And was by myself, like in the pandemic, being genuinely freaked out by this thing because
that's funny though. But this movie, you don't have to cover the screen almost.
Right?
Yeah. The monster's invisible.
So
this would be the movie to
of all of them. Yeah, it's just like I'm telling you, this shot of an empty kitchen is terrifying.
It's terrifying.
So, had you all seen this before?
Yes.
Okay.
I love this movie.
Yeah.
This is the crown jewel for me of these three. I love it. I think it's so smart. It's so patient. It rocketed my expectations so much it single-handedly destroyed Wolfman. when we reviewed that, because I was like, "Where's that Leigh Whannell?" I think that she should have been up for an Oscar.
Yes.
Elizabeth Moss.
I agree.
And I just think it's breathtakingly smart. I love it so much.
Yeah, this was the last movie I had saw before in theaters before lockdown. So I think that was for a lot of people. It's super smart. It is intelligent about like women's issues without like underlining them, like you were saying with Prey. Like it's about gaslighting. It's about being in an abusive relationship, in ways that a lot of horror movies I suppose are, but this one seems to have a real fresh view of it. It seems to be really smart. Strangely not exploitative. It's like this is seeing this really dangerous relationship from the inside, and it's just it's pretty devastating. Yeah, shocking and scary, and I remember gasping aloud in the theaters a couple of times. which is embarrassing, but
no, the dinner scene when she meets
her
sister.
My goodness.
Yeah.
I can't imagine anyone in the world seeing that coming. It was thrilling.
And then you go, of course that's what would happen, right?
Yeah.
Just like the paint sequence, like I was delighted that it went so Invisible Man lowbrow as to use paint. Like that was just awesome. But I think what's just speaking to the horror of Invisible Man, like why it's so effective and why I would not at all want to watch this movie in an empty house for 2 hours straight, because it does such a good job of demonstrating the fear of our empty safe spaces, right? And I'm this is where the lizard brain goes. Like you hear a sound, you look into the corner, you see a curtain blowing immediately after you watch this movie. If your first thought isn't like, should I throw something at that? Like, then you're not wired right. Like it's just really effective at implanting that horror inside of me. Now, the fact that completely sort of subverts the H.G. Wellsness of it and makes it her story is the real treat of this movie, that it's about, you know, trauma and paranoia, and you were, as you were saying, gaslighting and domestic abuse, and that she has the agency. We get to watch her growth to overcome this invisible obstacle. It's extraordinary. It's just an extraordinary journey.
It's so measured and so paced, and so that when it goes beyond that, that's when I was like, oh no, why did you have to go so, like, because my thing, the dinner thing was, it's shocking, but also this, like, that he suddenly puts it into her hand and her hand is up and holding it. And I was like, oh, what?
Yeah.
Like, that's mean.
Like, did he like go and like lift her arm and then put it in her hand? Why did she grab it? That was I was like, oh, because it takes away from this, you know, this genuine moment of me going, but how did he? And then in the end thing that she does this amazing sequence of her, like, it looks like she's trying to kill herself, and then it turns out that it was all a trap to sort of set him up of like, got you. And then the weirdest hallway fight, like all of a sudden he's super strong and then just waiting, and then these guys just one by one lining up to get killed. And I was like, okay, I got it. Like, I got it. Can we get back to like the measured pace and not just people being like what? I just saw somebody got shot in the head in front of me. What's happening? I don't know and then they die. And then the next person comes up and goes, hey, what? Somebody just got shot in front of me. What am I? Oh.
But if you can't see, I mean, you're watching that scene from a movie where you know that there's an invisible man, and you've been watching an Invisible Man movie the whole time. Yes, you would one after another walk into a hallway and go, what's going on? I'm going to aim my gun at nothing and then fall down and die. Especially because if you can't tense up for a punch that you don't see coming. And we knew that he was super strong when he ran all the way down the hill in the very beginning and busted through the window. We know he's a jacked guy. And so I was fine with all of that stuff. I like some of that stuff. Some of the outside when he's in the rain, it's like, you didn't think about rain. I don't know, like just sort of like a floating up invisible umbrella.
I actually thought that was really effective, though, like getting under the car. That was really effective for me.
Well, you know, there's like in other Invisible Man stories, there's like side effects of becoming invisible, like in Hollow Man, right? The serum like turns him homicidal. That's like and in the Invisible Man, the original one, there is something about him. There like basically no women in that entire novel, right? But kind of the subtext is that like it's sort of like feminine to do this thing like for his looks, and he's like vain and all of that stuff, right? And he kind of gets into like this almost like what's the word, homoerotic relationship with the guy who's sort of the narrator and that kind of thing, and like becoming feminized. And in this one, he's just a dude, right? So he's super strong or whatever. His sickness is that he is a man.
The most toxic of toxic masculinity.
Yeah, and he has the male gaze, right? That Clover and everyone else talks about. That he can look at her and without being looked at. And then in Clover's article, like she talks about how a lot of what the final girl does is take back, like still retains her femininity, but takes back the masculinity from the monster and kind of meshes them together. And in this one, right, her becoming the invisible woman, right, by the end of it is so satisfying. It's like it's just so great that I don't know. I didn't see coming. In retrospect, maybe you should have seen that part of it coming, that she'd put on the suit or whatever. But they'd be able to gaslight the rest of the world, and then her buddy Aldous Hodge is like, yeah, okay. Like I see what happened, but all right, we just sort of have to accept that.
My most traumatic moment for that whole thing is when she's in the room with her niece, I guess, and then and like the niece being so nice, and all of a sudden he's there and just clubs her across the head, and there's just no way for her to be like, there's literally only two of us in the room. It had to be. I mean, it's just the nightmare of, oh God, like there's no way, without sounding like an absolute crazy person. And then that goes to prove that you did. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the most
Oh.
traumatic. And then, like you're talking about at the end, her having set up this whole plan that we were not let in on,
Right.
which is beautiful. Like we're just going along. Like I know she's up to something, and we knew the suit as Chekhov's gun was out there,
Right.
but not knowing exactly what it was. And then he dies, and then that beautiful shot of her stepping out of camera, and then her face just entirely changes, just goes blank. Like
Right.
from the like, oh my god, please come help, and just absolutely shuts down. And that's what should have gotten her the Oscar right there. It's just it's beautiful.
Well,
she
and that
just
is
really-
that's that moment, right? That's that moment where she
That's the power.
transcends the obstacles and becomes that thing that sort of connects to the other two movies. The fact that she put the suit in the cubby hole, like that's the tell. I said that for Keenan, just so you can go back and watch it again and see it coming, because it was a shot that the movie called pretty loud.
Well, she turns and looks right at the camera and winks.
But the fact that it's such a that the movie gives such ownership of that climactic sort of defiance to her and doesn't take it away at all. And Aldous Hodge, I'll watch him all day long.
All day.
I love that guy so much. So yeah, all the pieces come together.
Yeah,
there is some interesting. I went back and forth on it because there were two parts that bothered me at first, because this movie is so POV obsessed that it's her story and everything is around her. She's in almost everything except for we stay in the kitchen when she leaves and he turns up the thing, and then when she steps outside and we see his breath behind her and she doesn't. Those originally bothered me because it's like the whole movie is centered around what she's seeing and what she's not. But then when I thought about it more, the movie is also doesn't belong to anyone, that the camera will just sink down hallways. Like sometimes it probably is him watching, we're seeing his POV. Sometimes it's just, let's just sort of track down this hallway and you're waiting for something to happen and nothing does. It's almost like the movie is haunting itself at times. And you're just seeing through all of these different kind of points of view, which is really fascinating. I didn't come up with the idea of that until too late, so I wasn't able to really like think about it as much as I would have wanted to, but that made me feel okay about getting those scares that she wasn't seeing, because it's almost like there's another invisible person the entire time and it's us. We're haunting the house, we're going around seeing and are able to see everything.
There's a version of this movie, right, where we're not sure if Elizabeth Moss is crazy, right? That if you didn't have those shots that you're talking about, Tommy, we might be like, oh gosh, maybe she is as insane, like the original Gaslight, right? Where we're like maybe Paula is insane, right? So I wonder about that, like do we might need just some kind of like release, some kind of like letting her off the hook, and so we're not judging her, because then we're really in her, we're convinced that there is an invisible man and that she is being everything bad in her life is because of this guy. Even, I mean, it sounds trivial compared to everything else, but when she shows up to the job interview and her portfolio is missing, I was like, oh my God, no. Like, that's so terrible. Horrible, right? And if you think it's her fault, I don't know how much you can be like, you just get it together, Cecilia.
Right.
Just
she opens her portfolio, her lunch rolls out, and you're like, come on.
Oh, again.
Oh, get yourself together.
My niece has my portfolio. Cut to the niece, she's just eating blueprints. Whole family is stupid. That's a really good point, Keenan. I like that idea of that does firmly put us where the movie puts us in the beginning. I like how this movie also, the saving of the cat is competency porn. It's not, I did all of these really nice things. It's this really slow getting out of this impossible prison and setting things up and getting everything, that's, you love her from the beginning because she is in control. She's not like, the terror has already started before the movie began. And that's a neat way to start it.
Yeah.
I want to shout out the brother, Michael Dorman. Dornan. He's one of my favorite actors. I'll get his name right. If you haven't watched the show on Amazon, Patriot, please go watch the show Patriot.
He's Patriot crazy.
I am Patriot. You don't even respond to me. I tell you things and I say, go watch this. I get nothing. Patriot.
You're the only person in my life recommending things to watch. I have so many things. 3 words for all mankind. I'm seasons behind.
Okay, well, he's in.
But that guy's in that too, right?
He's in for all mankind.
That's right.
He's in 20 episodes.
Watch them all simultaneously.
Yeah.
It's so. I want you to just get a wall of TVs and iPads and put everything on that he is in, because he's really, really exceptional. And and I really liked him in this because he has a way of like, and of course the part is to perpetuate the gaslight, right? To perpetuate the sort of her subservience to process. And I think he just does a very, very good job of it. But again, anytime I get to shout out Patriot, I have to do it. Amazon, please.
That one part when they're in the first meeting about the will.
Yeah.
And he's like, my brother's behind you right now. You just
Yeah.
freeze up. The movie knows exactly where we are at all times. I don't mean location wise, but just
So just as point of clarification, because like I actually haven't talked about this movie with anyone else, just because you guys are the only horror people in my life. Honestly, yeah, there's like everyone around is just like, ooh, why would you watch scary movies intentionally? The only time the brother was in the suit was at the end, right? Like that's like they sort of, they do the whole thing of like, oh no, it was the brother the whole time. That's what when he throws him under the bus essentially to try and do it. But like it wasn't both of them. That's right. Like,
that's how I read it, Kyle.
Yes,
is the way you're talking about. It never occurred to me. I suppose it could have been both of them taking turns, like scream killers or something. But yeah, that never occurred to me.
Okay,
it didn't for me either.
The movie's sort of non-committal about it in hindsight. Like I can see how the way it played out is designed to make you ask that question, and it's okay with you not knowing.
Yeah, I don't know what's worse, that it was the boyfriend the whole time, and then he set up his brother at the end, or if it is this conspiracy of brothers, doing it. I don't know what's worse. They're both equally worse than the other somehow.
Yeah.
Yeah, but once again, this is after being, not only disbelieved but accused of a crime committed, and then going to be punished for it. Then she takes it back, but then sets up this beautiful, elaborate thing to catch him where he thinks he's at his most powerful, and then brings it down. And also, there's something about there's something in there that I think Keenan probably could explain better than me, but about serving him dinner. And that is where
becoming a Mad Men secretary wife, and
exactly.
And doing all of that, and being the I was trying to avoid Gone Girl spoilers because people didn't show up to our podcast for Gone Girl spoilers. but it's kind of it feels like in a lot of conversation with Gone Girl and what it is to be the perfect wife, and then to be the cool girl, and then in Gone Girl it's a lot about performing. So that shot you were talking about, where she sneaks away from the security cameras, right? I mean, that's a lot like Gone Girl as well, but this time with our hero doing it. It's like, you're gonna use that performance as much as you can to win.
But I sort of as a sort of as we're wrapping up all these things, it's also interesting that these are 3 very strong female roles, and I know that phrase gets bandied around a lot as a sort of almost like a mark of embarrassment or whatever too. But I mean it in the most positive sense possible. 3 very powerful women, all written by men.
Yeah, I had heard people misunderstanding The Invisible Man as being written by Lee Winnell, who they assume is a woman. Without knowing that he's the co-writer of the Saw movies and all of that. And so people were like, "Oh, it's made by a woman." Like, I don't know, should I ruin that for you? Like you're just enjoying it, you're having a good time.
But I think it does go to show though that like this is very much in the culture though too. Like this is something that there was not being served, and these people found a way to do this, and regardless of their gender. It'd be interesting to see if we could come a similar list could be made of women writing this too. There's to see if there's what the difference is between that.
Yeah,
so that's food for thought for later. But
I think it's what we get with Leigh Whannell, and I think we get this also with Wolfman as much as Tommy slams it.
I like 2 parts of it.
Yeah, right. Me too. It feels to me like like committing, text to screen, with and being willing to sort of exude empathy is what allows you to write so compellingly the opposite sex, male, woman, male, female, whatever, across the sort of gender spectrum. And I think what we get what I'm noticing when I see characters that are written really poorly, it's just that lack of empathetic voice that we just don't. It's too focused on writer ego to be able to step out and feel the experience of someone else. And I don't know. I guess I cede that point to you guys, if that makes any sense. But that's kind of my gut.
It's a tough balancing act. So again, Carol Clover describes when she was defining the final girl, it was as the victim hero, victim hyphen hero. And I don't know. I think you could overdo the victim part. You could overdo the hero part, right? So that's a pretty tough balancing act, I would say, to get it perfectly right.
Yeah, I think we found 3 that do it, that walk that line, that thread that needle very well. So as we're wrapping up our conversations on Last Women Standing, anybody have any final thoughts about these 3 as a piece?
These were all great choices, and they complemented each other really well because they were extremely different, but then had the same through lines throughout, which is always sort of appreciative to see them from different points of view.
Yeah, and just a quick comparison between all of them. They all, at the end, have the woman taking back some kind of relic from the monster. Sweetheart, it took me a while to figure out what she was doing. She's cutting off the head of the creature so she can prove, right? So I can't be dismissed. I have the thing in my purse, or, here it is. Anytime someone says that didn't really happen to you, here it is, right? And so all 3 of them have that. And so still it's a little bit like, as much as they've come a long way, like still maybe no one will believe them if they don't bring back a predator head or a Invisible Man suit. Yeah.
That was the most satisfying of her walking away with the suit. Like that was just like viscerally satisfying because also I would love a suit. That's great. No, it was a really great selection, Kyle. I loved watching these movies in this context. I think this was really, really fun. And really just astute pairing.
I'm glad that you guys all enjoyed it and got to see all the things. And Tommy, you're welcome for me not putting "Run, Sweetheart, Run" in this. I chose the correct title that had "Sweetheart" in it.
Got it.
So all right, so thank you for going along with this journey with you. So I now cede the floor back to the collective,
and the collective now cedes the floor to Thomas W.
Me. I am in charge for our next one, and we are finally, I desperately hope we haven't already done this. My memory is not what it used to be, but it's a genre of horror movies that I don't believe we've really delved into, and it might be my favorite: haunted houses.
Ooh.
So my topic is location, haunted spaces and the haunted people within them. We will be watching 3 movies: Brad Anderson's Session 9, my man Mike Flanagan's Ouija, Origin of Evil. Make sure do not watch the original Ouija. You do not need it. It is not good. That was the first Blumhouse. But Mike Flanagan's Ouija, Origin of Evil, which is weirdly a prequel to the first movie. And then an old favorite that if you haven't seen, welcome to it. If you haven't seen it in a long time, welcome back to it: Alejandro Almendar's The Others.
Nice.
So those are going to be the 3. And we're going to be talking about what makes haunted things haunted and who's haunting who's, the location haunting the person, vice versa. What are the rules? All of those things.
And this is less so. We're focusing on the location, not the ghosts.
Both
right?
haunted spaces and the haunted people within them.
Okay.
Ooh.
Okay. Haunted spaces. and
Because
haunted
if they're
people.
haunted people are also locations. I just really wanted
Yeah.
to say locations. Don't think too much into it.
You can't have a haunted house without a ghost. Then
Yeah.
it's just a house.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, I can't wait for that. That is coming in what month? April? That's our April show. I
Correct.
can't wait. Well done. Good pick. Letterbox lists will be up shortly. And I think that's all the news we have. We're doing great. We keep the show tight. We're doing great.
We did it.
I have to get. I don't know if you can tell. I have to get back to my notes.
I say.
Really stalling for the notes. Thank you everybody for joining us this month. Make sure you do all the stuff you do with podcasts. If you like to get sometimes longer ad-free episodes of the show, visit thenextreel.com/membership and subscribe for just a few bucks. You'll have access to the Beefier Show plus all the triple secret Discord channels on the True Story FM server, and we would love to have you there. On behalf of our esteemed educator, Kyle Olson and Tommy Metz III and Kenan Diaz, I'm Pete Wright, and we will be back here next month. See you sitting in the dark.
Great.
And scene. I just learned you can type in here.
Yeah.
I am making a real big note to myself not to watch the original Ouija. Not
Yeah. You don't have to worry about that.
original.
Who was in Ouija Origin of Evil? I swear I've seen that.
I saw it in the theater.
Tom?
I saw both of these.
I know,
in the
but
theater.
didn't you tell me to watch it for some reason? Have I seen it?
The first Ouija? No.
No, I've not seen the first Ouija. I think you told me to watch Ouija Origin of Evil.
I'm sure I did because I'm such a Flanagan head.
Yeah.
Did you see the trailer for